Special forces have long captured people's imaginations. Books, films, video games and news outlets propagate an image of heroism and mysticism, only added to by government's reticence to discuss their operations. The impact of this is that, while almost everyone knows or thinks they know what special forces are, few really know what they do. This article seeks to address this by giving an introduction to the operations of special forces, using the U.S. Special Operations Forces (SOFA) as a case study. The first section of this article will describe what SOF do, especially looking at their two core tasks in dismantling terrorist groups, direct and indirect operations, and their increasing role as the sole boots on the ground. The second section briefly describes the history of SOF, from their origins in World War II to the Obama administration, where, attempting to balance tackling this threat with the political desire to bring troops home, they became his tool of choice. The final section touches upon three dangers with the current use of SOF: the damage to democracy, given the secrecy of SOF and prominence of their use in U.S. operations; the overuse what is a comparably small and specifically trained part of the U.S. force; and the problems it could present for U.S.'s broader foreign policy goals. There are two key points should be addressed from the outset. The first is that the U.S. is far from a typical example of special forces use, however much of the debate has been dominated by discussion of U.S. SOF. This is perhaps unsurprising given that in SOFA as well as in conventional military capacity, the U.S. far outstrips its allies in terms of expenditure, number of personnel and extensiveness of deployment. Florent et al. N.D. Terse, 2017. The second is that while the terms Special Forces and Special Operations Forces (SOF) are often used interchangeably, they refer to different things, at least in the U.S. context. SOF is a predominantly U.S.-based umbrella term used to cover all Special Forces units as well as units who are conventionally trained but who work with the Special Forces. Scotland, 2017. This article will refer to SOF, but much of the discussion draws on examples from the narrower operations of U.S. Special Forces, such as those of U.S. Navy SEAL teams. Special Forces and Special Operation Forces (U.S. SOF) are small, elite military units with special training and equipment that can infiltrate into hostile territory through land, sea, or air to conduct a variety of operations, many of them classified FICART, 2008. Under Title 10 of the United States Code, they have been assigned 10 core activities: direct action, strategic reconnaissance, unconventional warfare, foreign internal defense training local troops, civil affairs, psychological operations, counterterrorism, humanitarian assistance, theater search and rescue, and special activities authorized by the Secretary of Defense or the President. Finland, 2008, p. 8. Compared to regular forces, U.S. SOF are defined by their seniority. They are often trained in several different military disciplines, and their ranks are often filled with older, more experienced troops drawn from the ranks of elite regular units. NATO, 2013, pp. 1-1, 1-2. Moreover, unlike regular combat forces, SOF are able to act under the radar, and can be deployed without the level of oversight that would usually come with the formal outbreak of hostilities. Finland, 2008, p. 11. Direct and indirect uses of SOF in its efforts to dismantle terrorist groups. The U.S. government has tasked SOF with two key activities: undertaking direct strikes against terrorist targets and building the capacity of local forces. The first of these, also referred to as direct operations, are typically brief although often involve extensive planning and usually carry a higher potential for the use of weapons. Bucci, 2015. The most famous example of this type of operation is Operation Neptune, where SEAL Team 6 killed Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. Schaller, 2015. The second involves working by, with, and through local and national military forces so that they carry out the brunt of frontline fighting. Bucci, 2015. This type of engagement is being used far more in the fight against terrorist groups, both as a way to avoid the deployment of large numbers of U.S. forces and, longer term, as an attempt to build local and regional security capacity. Reef, 2014. Robinson, 2017. In recent years, with the drawdown of conventional troops, SOF have increasingly been the only U.S. force in a number of conflict areas. While regular forces have been brought home, the more covert SOF units have been deployed more extensively than before. With this, their role has changed from a force multiplier to the sole U.S. military presence. As General Raymond Anthony Thomas, commander of U.S. SOCOM, recently said, SOF are no longer a mere break glass in case of war force but are now proactively engaged across the battlespace. Lodge, 2017. History. U.S. SOF trace their origins back to the Office of Strategic Services (OSS) in World War II, which was formed to gather strategic intelligence and conduct operations behind enemy lines. Special Forces Association, N.D. Since, SOF development has ebbed and flowed between extensive use and expansion and then skepticism, often following controversy. For example, under John F. Kennedy in the 1960s and the former Army Chief of Staff, General Edward Meyer, in the 1980s, SOF were seen as the best means to defend the U.S. against present-day threats because of their perceived aptitude for counterinsurgency and were expanded Prados 2015 Special Forces Association, N.D. However, scandals have also tempered their use, such as Operation Eagle Claw in 1980, a failed attempt to rescue hostages in Tehran by Delta Force in which a helicopter crashed into a transport aircraft, killing 8 servicemen, causing international and domestic uproar and, arguably, costing Jimmy Carter the 1980 U.S. presidential election. Keller, 2017. U.S. SOF as we know them today were officially established by Congress in the 1980s. The Joint Special Operations Command JSOC, which is tasked with the highly classified unit at the Joint Headquarters for America's Tier 1 Countering Terrorism CT Special Mission Units SMU, was established in 1980. Bucci, 2015. Kib, 2004. Then 7 years later, U.S. Special Operations Command USSOCOM was established, to develop preparedness of forces, plan and conduct special fighter. 2008. Lin, N.D. SOF wars in the post-911. In the post-911 wars, SOF have played a central role. Initially they were used to bolster conventional troops in a move spearheaded by Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. SOCOM was tasked with leading the global war on terror, and given additional resources to do so. Fitzsimmons, 2003. Ryan, 2011. In this role, USSOF were a substantial force multiplier. Finland, 2008, p. 100. However, their greatest utility came during the Obama administration, with declining military budgets and a rising war weariness. With the continuing prevalence of irregular threats to U.S. national security but facing a greater domestic resistance to U.S. troops on the ground, the Obama administration turned increasingly to its SOF to provide a light footprint of U.S. troops on the ground. Robinson, 2017, p. 6. As such, the withdrawal of troops from Iraq and Afghanistan saw SOF play an increasingly central role. The U.S. has brought home more than 200,000 troops and massively cut the military budget, yet, at the same time SOF continued to see increased resources. Phillips, 2017. Robinson, 2013. In 2001 there were 2,886 US SOF personnel deployed overseas, and now there are at least 8,000 troops in 80 countries across the world. TERS, 2017. This is a form of remote warfare, where US SOF are enabling local troops to confront terrorist threats rather than relying on the deployment of large numbers of US boots on the ground. Drawbacks to increased use of special forces. While special operation forces represent highly trained and highly able individuals, there are a number of concerns with their increasing use. First, the fact that US SOF are subject to less oversight than regular forces is problematic when they are increasing being deployed in lieu of regular troops. The U.S. does have more external oversight of SOF than some of its allies, such as the UK for example. Congress, through the Senate and House Armed Services Committees, can oversee a number of aspects of SOF operations. For example, there are a number of rules that require the executive to inform Congress, or at least some subset of Congress, about military and intelligence activities, though there are gaps among them, especially as the convergence between Title 10 military, such as Special Forces operations, and Title 50 CIA activities authorizations are beginning to merge. Chesney, 2012. Despite this, a number of commentators have argued for more oversight. Following a trail of recent SOF scandals, including a raid in Yemen at the start of the year where a number of civilians were killed in an operation in October this year in Niger which left 4 SOF soldiers dead, Laura Lump and Jacob Marks, of Open Society Foundation, questioned whether the U.S.'s oversight mechanisms have been working. Lump and Marks, 2017. They found that most lawmakers did not know these operations were even taking place. They concluded either the Pentagon has not been informing Congress, or it is sending updates and reports, but nobody is reading them. While a level of deniability can be useful, it can also be highly problematic for democracies, since deniable policies by definition lack the kind of accountability democracy requires. Kib, 2004. There is talk of a growing disconnect between American society and the armed forces, which has grown worse throughout the war on terror, in part because the Obama administration has been unwilling to level with the public about what it is doing. Correspondent, N.D. Forcing everything into a narrative of drawdown has meant ignoring the deep involvement of troops on the ground. In an interview with Dan Sullivan, a Republican on the Senate's Armed Services Committee, he said that the lesson that we've learned now in this country is that you have to level with the American, because that's just the right thing to do, and that's the best way to get American support, but also because there's an issue with keeping faith with troops who are risking their lives to protect their country's correspondent, N.D. Second, many are worried that U.S. SOF, which only constitute less than 5% of total U.S. military forces, are being asked to do too much. Robinson, 2013. In May this year, Acting Assistant Secretary of Defense Teresa Whalen said to Congress, "We have had to eat our young, and mortgage the future in order to facilitate current operations." Lodge, 2017. Interviews with former and current Special Operations Forces, and their relatives, have repeatedly found that the current tempo of operations is threatening troop retention, military effectiveness, and the well-being of soldiers. Munoz, 2013. Lohaus, 2016. Phillips, 2017. Powell, 2016. Even General Raymond Anthony Thomas, commander of U.S. SOCOM, called the current situation unsustainable. Hennigan, 2017. Third, given the political and economic costs of deploying conventional troops, many are concerned that the U.S. has turned to SOF as the most politically expedient force, rather than the most effective one for the task at hand, potentially to the detriment of a larger strategy. Knowles and Watson, 2017. Matthew Johnson, of Missouri State University, argues that in their efforts to destroy terrorist groups, leaders have latched onto the promises and even mystique of SOF. The temptation of limited investment with substantial return continues to make SOF an attractive offer to policymakers, even if this understanding sets up a false expectation. Johnson, 2006. Moreover, there are dangers that relying on SOF can undermine the U.S. long-term strategy. There are many concerns that this happened with direct operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Conrad A. Crane, a retired Army officer and historian, said, following a number of interviews with the military and civilians in both countries, that virtually everyone has a similar story to tell, of some special operations raid that might have been good counterterrorism but was terrible counterinsurgency. Ricks, 2016. Nor are indirect operations immune from such dangers. Supporting groups who may not share the same long-term goals as the U.S. can create spoilers and greater instability, as shown by the U.S. support of the Peshmerga in its fight against ISIS, which many see as a key driver in the escalating tensions between the Kurds and its neighbors. Ala-Eldin, 2017. Burns and Baldor, 2017. Gould et al., 2017. Jaffrey, 2017. Zemek-Lemon, 2017. These dangers have gained a new immediacy under President Donald Trump. While predictions are difficult, his administration looks likely to continue to rely on U.S. SOF. He has readily praised their use, stating no enemy stands a chance against our special forces and look set to increase their footprint. Lodge, 2017. Hennigan, 2017. Thus, given his inexperience, as well as his startling campaign and rhetoric, safeguards are more important than ever. Conclusions. SOF have been a defining feature of U.S. military engagement in its post-9/11 wars, yet few understand who they are, what they do, and the dangers of their increased use. More worryingly, obsession with SOF appears to be undermining any objective discussion of the pros and cons of their deployment. As one SOF officer said, everyone is infatuated with SOF. To do anything against SOF would be absolute sacrilege on both sides of the aisle. Johnson, 2006. This article hopes to go some way to improving the discussion by providing an overview of who SOF are, how they formed. It also described their rise under President Barack Obama, who used SOF to deliver on his electoral promises of a drawdown of troops, while continuing to address the terrorist threat. It outlined 3 dangers of the current use of special forces: problems of oversight, overstretch of SOF, and ensuring their deployment aligns with the U.S. strategy. While it has not provided an extensive overview of the issue, this piece hopes to challenge the mysticism around SOF, to open the space for a more objective and informed debate. As General Thomas has warned, U.S. SOF are not a panacea. We are not the ultimate solution to every problem, and treating them as if they can will only detriment U.S. strategy, democracy, and the soldiers themselves. Special Operations Chief, 2017. Bibliography. Ala-Eldin, R. 2017. Countries. We are not at war with the war on terror on the periphery from Bush to Obama. Int. Paula, 48, 364-389, https://doi.org 10.1057 ip.2011.7 Schaller, C. 2015. Using force against terrorists outside areas of active hostilities, the Obama approach and the bin Laden raid revisited. J. Confl. Secure. Law 20, 195-227, https://doi.org 10.1093 Jake Screw 022 Scoveland, M. 2017. The difference between special operations and special forces. The Havoc Journal. www. Document. Havoc J. URL http://favocjournal.com. Culture. The difference between special operations and special forces. Access 10.19.17. Special Forces Association, N.D. SF History. Special Operations Chief. We are not a panacea. www. Document. 2017. SOFREP. URL http://sofrep.com 80765 Special Opeton Chief. We are not a panacea. Access 10.26.17. TERS, N. 2017. American Special Operations Forces are deployed to 70% of the world's countries. The Nation. Z. McLemmon, G. 2017. So Trump is arming Kurds, then what? www. Document. Def. 1. URL http www.defense1.com. It is 201705. So Trump arming Kurds, then what? 137782 accessed 5.15.17.